Um, our agenda today, we'll be going over what is an elevator pitch, how do you create one. You'll have an opportunity to practice your elevator pitch. And like I said, we won't be doing this in a breakout rooms. We'll be doing this kind of all together. And then there'll be an opportunity for us to practice some networking, and we'll explain kind of what that looks like and how that is. And we'll, again, a lot of what the curriculum that we had for this was based on breakout rooms. So you all are going to get a real opportunity to see some improv on the fly, kind of like working here on behalf of the staff to figure out how we'll facilitate some of these pieces, but I'm excited. Typically in a networking space, you may see something like an exchange of business cards, right? Or an exchange of information. What we want to have virtually here today is an opportunity after the networking to have an information exchange by dropping information here in the chat box. And then we'll close out with an opportunity with some questions. I want to pause now and give myself an opportunity to take a breath, have a little sip of my tea, and give you, anybody, an opportunity who has any questions or clarifications to mic up and ask those and or put them in the chat box. Excellent. Okay, next slide. Oh, these transitions are going to be hilarious. Before we get started, I would like to go ahead and invite Kai and Gabby to engage folks in a poll. Rebecca and I have an opportunity now to share a little bit more and dig a little bit deeper with y'all about what exactly an elevator pitch is. So I want to welcome back one of the amazing co-collaborators for this program, Rebecca.
Oh, you're so good for my self-esteem. This is great. So it sounds like all of you are at least somewhat familiar with the idea of an elevator pitch. I think historically the idea of it is just that it's like a really short spiel, a minute or less, just meant to introduce yourself to someone in a professional setting. I think there's like some, I don't know if it's actually true or not, like some myth associated with, you're in an elevator ride with the CEO and you've got to like pitch your idea or like pitch yourself as somebody that they want to collaborate with. And you have under a minute to do it. What are you going to say? Which I don't know, that sounds really stressful. And I think maybe the myth is meant to stress people out, so that you feel motivated to actually do it. But that's unlikely to happen, right? So we're here to tell you a little bit more about how to make this a more human process and a little bit more comfortable so that you don't feel like you have to really sell yourself as some kind of product. All right, so next slide. These transitions crack me up.
I know, and I really love what you said
gosh.
in the chat, Gabby. The slides are drama queens, and I was like, well, they're in the right place then.
Yep. So Travis, take it away.
Yeah, so we know it feels strange to practice talking about yourself, to practice introducing yourself. When we're initially like a little behind the scenes footage of planning this event, really kind of planning the goals. And it was like, is the goal really just to like let folks practice talking in public? Like, yes, that's a huge thing for many, many people. It's really intimidating to speak up in public, really intimidating, particularly if you feel like you're competing with other people in a space for time and for someone's attention. So it's important that we carve out time to do that in a judge-free, kind of shame-free space where we can support each other and uplift each other. So yeah, right. Most of us spent the better half of the past year engaging in really different ways than we did before, So we're honoring that context. In one way, this may have some of you feeling more adventurous about engaging in the newer practice of networking or getting out into the job market to do that. Maybe you're excited. Conversely, it may also have some of you feeling like even more intimidated. I know for myself, preparing to go, I call myself an introvert, extrovert, like extreme. Like I really like extroverting and I give so much of myself that then I also need to kind of like have like a solid night or two of just like quiet. Right. But thinking to myself, even as an more extroverted person, I'm feeling a little bit nervous about heading back into social settings. Like, am I going to know how to do it right again? Things like that. So just remembering that we're in this together and we're here to support each other today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think so for some reason this has more transition. So just like keep clicking for a bit. I'll talk about that in a sec. I think one of the things that feels really weird and kind of icky for me when I think about networking is just this idea that I have to like sell myself. Like I need somebody else to like find me interesting enough to want to talk to or like valuable enough to want to work with. And that can feel really like a lot of pressure and inauthentic, and I don't know, just kind of gross, right? I think for me, it helps to reframe networking as something that I'm doing all the time. Like networking is about human connection. Networking is about understanding the connections between what I'm interested in and passionate about working toward, and the ways that that connects with other people's passions and interests. And so I think if you can kind of practice this through that mindset of, I just want to make sure that when I am in a position to be talking to somebody in a professional setting, like, this one, for example, that I know what to say so that I can kind of maximize our opportunities to talk to each other, so that it doesn't feel like my mind is just blank and it becomes a really unpleasant experience. I think that can kind of make it easier. So I'm giving you this kind of formula in case you're like me and sometimes your mind goes blank, but you don't necessarily need to use this. You don't need to use it verbatim. Like, take from it what is useful for you, and leave the rest. But basically, like, if somebody in an interview asks you, like, tell me about yourself, here's like some good things to include your name. You're likely introducing yourself, so they want to know your name. You can include your pronouns as well, if that's something that's comfortable for you, or if that's a space that feels affirming. You can include your year, school, and major if you're still in school. If you graduated, you can maybe talk about that if it was recent. Including your relevant areas of interest or skills. This is, I think, where it becomes more interesting, because if you've been working, or if you've been kind of engaging with your schoolwork around specific themes, sharing those with the person that you're talking to can help them to understand you a little bit better. So, when you're looking at some of the like maybe 2 to 3 past experiences that you've had, what are some things that connect those? Like, were you involved specifically in education through an equity lens, and you're really excited about making education more accessible, and you've been working as a tutor and as somebody who's doing outreach for students, but really the thing that ties them together is that passion for equity. That's the thing that you want to talk about, versus doing kind of like a laundry list of like, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and now I'm going to do this. So thinking more in terms of theme or interest, something that maybe you're good at, that kind of ties it all together and makes it a more compelling story. So at the end of the pitch, I don't like calling it that. I don't have a better word for it. At the end of your little introduction of yourself, it's a good practice to focus on something future oriented. So what do you want to do next? Sometimes this is like takes the form of like an ask. So like asking somebody else a question, or like kind of launching it so that someone else can join in and contribute to the conversation. That's where it's really nice to kind of work together too. And if you have somebody else there that maybe you can plan this out a little bit ahead of time. But if not, talking about where you're hoping to take your interest in the future, where some of your goals are. What is something that you're curious about? Maybe you're talking to somebody at like a career fair and you want to know more about how their organization interacts with the ideas that you've been really excited about. Kind of finding a bridge between what you've been doing and where you're hoping to go will really help the conversation start. Because you don't want to say this whole thing and then end the conversation. And if you do a super robotic, like canned scripted spiel, it tends to kind of kill the conversation. So we don't want that. So next slide. All right, so here's a new approach. This is a way, I love this little graphic. It's just a way to think about it. Focusing, like choosing something you love, something that you want, or something that matters to you. Something that makes your eyes light up, picking that as your topic and orienting it by talking about how you've interacted with that thing in the past, what you're currently doing, and where you're hoping to go with it. So context matters. If you're talking about, like if you're at, an event where maybe you're meeting a bunch of people and it's more of like a personal, or you're at like a party, or, something that's not necessarily like professionally oriented, you could talk about anything. You could be like, I'm really into traveling. Last year, I tried to go to all 50 states. This year, I've just been, planning out future trips, hoping that one day I'm going to get to go. And the next place that I really want to go is Europe. Has anybody here gone to any I don't know, countries that they would really recommend traveling to. Like, where's your favorite place to travel? And so like, you know, kind of bringing it back to where you're hoping to go and inviting other people in to then contribute. All right, so next slide. So in a professional context, you're going to focus on work, and Travis, jump in if you feel like. So rather than just talking, like I said, about the laundry list of like things that you've done, I think focusing more on what parts of your work do you love? Like, what are the parts of your job that really light you up? And how have you demonstrated that through some of your different experiences? So, you know, this is like a really, I don't know, I couldn't come up with like a good short example, but I love connecting better with consumers through social media. You probably wouldn't call them consumers, but you know, it depends on context.
You might.
Yeah, you might. It depends on where you're working, right?
Yeah. I want to chime in really quickly here, if I can, Rebecca, to say that I know sometimes you may find yourself in a position where you're really struggling to figure out what you love about work right now. I think it's okay. My reframe for that for you would be, what were you excited about doing when you went to that job? And is it okay if you just say, like, this is something that I was really excited about when I started this job? You know, that's a way of not necessarily like lying or being dishonest or being like, yeah, I really love it. Like being like, yeah, when I started this job, I was really, really excited about this. It's been fun working with. I was really excited about connecting with consumers through social media. That's been an interesting experience for me. Right. That's a way that like you can kind of tell, like, when I started, I was excited about this. It's been interesting. I didn't say I was still loving it, but you know, so there's balancing acts to this too, where you can find a right balance for yourself and trying to keep it real, you know, as best as you can, if that's important to you, but also, you know, strike that balance.
Absolutely. That's a really, really good point. And I think this is also like, you don't have to love the whole job by any means. There's got to be like some part of it that's at least interesting. And even if maybe it's not like at work, maybe it's something that you're doing in school. You know, like if there's like a group project that really got you thinking about a specific topic, you know, you can be creative in how you want to present this. But picking something that you at least have something to say about versus picking something that you're like, okay, well, this sounds good, but like, I'm not really interested, or I don't know how I would continue a conversation about this. So let the listeners know like how that aspect of your work has gone in the past, what you're working on now, and then how you're hoping to expand upon it in the future. So the other part of this too is like, sometimes this is going to take a little bit of thought ahead of time, right? Like that's partly why we're doing this workshop together, is just thinking about these things in advance, so that you can really give yourself the time to reflect. And in doing that, that's actually going to be really helpful for you in a lot of different areas in your life. Right? Because as you're reflecting about the things that you've done at work that you liked or didn't like, that's going to help you to make meaning of your experiences, which will then help you build a better career path for yourself. You know, so if you're like, wow, I actually dislike 90% of the job that I'm doing right now, starting to ask yourself like, okay, well, what about it am I not liking? Like, what are the pieces that are just not feeling aligned for me? And then making sure that you sort of understand those things so that then you don't find yourself applying to another position, just like, you know, going through the motions for something that isn't necessarily going to be fulfilling for you. On the flip side of that, you know, what are the parts of it that you really, really like? And maybe it's not in the same industry. Like maybe you're going to be jumping into a whole new way of working, but you're still going to be carrying through your passion for working one-on-one with people and hearing from them and their stories, for just as an example. So looking for themes in what you've done is not only just like good for making conversation and for connecting with other people, but it's also just good for connecting with yourself and making sure that you're doing things that are fulfilling. All right, next slide. Oh, sorry, Travis.
No, you're good. Thanks, Rebecca. So the elevator pitch or the intro piece is the beginning, and then there's the other 90%. And so want to really share that this is an opportunity to demonstrate that you are listening and engaged. So you don't need to feel pressure to talk the entire time in that networking exchange. Once you get past that intro or elevator pitches we've been talking about, think of maybe one or two questions that you might ask. Don't worry, you get breaks. You don't need to talk the whole time, as I just said. Consider the opportunity to ask questions as your opportunity to take a break, catch your breath, particularly if public speaking or social situations causes any kind of anxiety. If you're feeling your heartbeat really fast, I know sometimes for me, if things like that come up, all of a sudden, even though I'm a like really engaged public speaker, I'm like, oh, my lips doing a quivery thing, and it makes it weird for me to talk. Why is it doing that? So give yourself breaks. Consider smiling and nodding as nonverbal ways to feel affirming in a conversation, while also getting an opportunity to take some deep breaths. So in a conversation, right? Right, I'm like breathing, right? I'm catching my breath. I'm doing some deep inhales and exhales, but I'm also, doing this. If you know me, I actually really do this in meetings and things. It's because I feel the need to engage always, and I'm always wanting to talk. And given the identities I hold and the privileges I hold, I'm trying to be mindful about not speaking, right, all the time, or like not doing that thing. So for me, it's really important to be like, breathe, Travis. And as I'm breathing, I can like shake my head and I can kind of like keep myself engaged, right? And this is also an opportunity to practice community care. So again, a flip side of the idea of this being a super competitive space, what if you and a friend, or what if you and a work colleague or a buddy actually go together to a networking event? And what if you actually practice ahead of time a script that you can do back and forth, so that when you find yourself in a situation, you have an opportunity to support one another, tap one another in. This is a really, again, this is a community care approach to networking, right? Versus like an individualistic kind of approach. So thinking about those things, if you have the opportunity to, and again, recognizing the reality for some folks is like, sounds cute, Trav, want to get there someday. Right now I'm competing for a job. So like, that's real too. So this is just a suggestion, right? Another way to sort of think through things.
Everyone loves a good listener. Like if you ask good questions, even if you're not talking about yourself a whole lot and you're asking other people about themselves, they're going to walk away with a positive impression of you. And so I think sometimes that can alleviate pressure too. Like, this isn't about just you performing. This is about like really understanding and hearing from and learning about other people. And so hopefully that can kind of help take some of that pressure off.